Thank you, Pat. My name is Kevin McNeely. I'm a RESNet HERS rater and a BPI building analyst, the two regulating bodies for doing energy audits and on buildings. I'm also an Energy Star partner and work actively in the Lead for Homes program with the U.S. Green Building Council.
And Dave Eifert, I've been involved in green building, consulting, working with builders, architects, municipalities, governing bodies, also experience as energy rating, energy audits, and happy to be here with you guys today.
So today we're going to try and demystify the RESNet HERS Index a bit, just do what I call a bird's eye view of it, an overflight, and we'll try and dig down deeper maybe on another webinar. But so what is the RESNet HERS Index? It is a matrix to measure the building's energy use and how energy efficient a building is, so that you can compare it. You can compare either buildings that sit next door to each other or buildings in different climate zones and states to figure out how energy efficient they are. It's not an opinion of an appraiser. It's an actual calculated objective measurement. What does it mean? Again, it gives you the energy use of the buildings, and it can give you ways to make your building more efficient. It can help you prioritize your goals and objectives for upgrades, or it can look at what your ROI is and for upgrades to even before you do your plans for your building. How can your building benefit from it? As I said, it makes your building more energy efficient, but it also improves the durability of your building. It can turn up moisture infiltration issues. It can reduce your mechanical upgrade costs. A lot of times the mechanical contractors will oversize because they don't want the tenants to be uncomfortable, or they don't want to take a chance on the mechanical systems being too large. So a lot of times we see that the mechanicals are anywhere from 35 all the way up to 100% oversized. So simple things like that. How can my tenants benefit from it? Their units will be more comfortable. They shouldn't have cold spots or drafty areas, drafty windows. The indoor air quality will be better. There have been numerous studies done that have said that the indoor air quality in buildings is worse than the air quality outside. And there's also been studies that have said that have shown that students that are in energy efficient and healthy buildings do better in school. So the kids will benefit from it. How can it affect my bottom line? Well, you reduce the energy use in your building. You're going to reduce, if you're paying part of the utility costs, you're going to reduce that, your percentage of that. If you're paying all of it, obviously it's more money in your pocket. It can also, it looks at everything from energy, water use. We can reduce your water. So if you have 500 toilets, and we can cut the use in half. Now all of a sudden you're not paying for that much water. Who can and shouldn't be requesting it, and why? Anybody that's either owns a building, is looking at purchasing, or building a building should be requesting one. HERS raters can come in and really give you some good solid ideas on how to make your building more energy efficient. And then if you're purchasing a building, you need to know what is that building's energy use going to be month in and month out. It's fair for you and it's fair for your tenants. So. What is the HERS Index? The HERS stands for Home Energy Rating System, and basically it's a miles per gallon rating for building. It's a comparison of a code-built building to your building's construction, either new construction or an existing building. And as the energy codes are upgraded and adopted, the HERS Index adjusts accordingly for the new code. And that's it in a nutshell. This is a sample HERS Index. This particular building has a HERS Index of 80. A code-built building will have a HERS index of 100, so this building is 20% more efficient than a code-built building. And then you can see that we have some annual energy savings over typical homes. And then it also gets into your carbon footprint and comfort levels on the home. If you drop all the way down, you can get down into the 30s, which is a very efficient building. If you get down to a net zero building, that's actually a building that produces as much energy as it uses. We have seen a couple of buildings that get into negatives where they're producing more energy, but those are pretty rare.
When you see higher ratings up in the 130s, 140s, 150s, those are typically older buildings built older code standards from the 1960s, 1970s.
So you want the HERS index to be low, kind of like a golf score. I don't know about everyone else out there, but I've been told that about golf, but my scores don't show it, and I don't believe it. So, how can it be used? You can use it for just strictly for an inspection to compare buildings prior to a purchase. If two buildings are identical and one is 60% more energy efficient than the next one, you're going to look long and hard at buying the one that's more efficient. You can also use it if you're looking to sell your building. If your building is that building that's 60% more efficient than the one around the corner, you're going to lay out documents to show that, and the HERS index can do that. You show the potential purchasers and your real estate agent, how efficient your building is, and it's third-party verified, so it has a lot of weight behind it. You can use it again if you're doing improvements on or proposing improvements to your building. You can do what-if scenarios with the rating, and it'll estimate the energy use for your building in the future. Now we have asterisks there because that is greatly affected by occupant behavior. The modeling software will try and normalize it as best it can, but the occupancy is still rule of the land. So how can it be used? A lot of tax incentives and mortgages, especially an energy efficient mortgage, require a HERS index for a building if you're looking for that tax incentive or for those terms on the mortgage. A lot of utilities, if you upgrade your furnaces, your insulation, windows, you can receive incentive money from your utilities, and they require, depending on the state that you're in, and I'm not familiar with Minnesota there, but over where I'm at, they have a two-tier payment system for utility incentive money. One tier is lower if you don't have an audit done versus the next tier that if you have an audit done, they'll actually pay you more money because you're basically proving where your building is at. Some grants require a HERS index. They want to know where your building's at and where it lands after you do your upgrades or on the construction of it. And then a lot of third-party certification programs, building certification programs such as Energy Star and Lead for Homes utilize the HERS index. And the reason that they do that is because it is a third-party verification that the building meets the standards that it said it was going to build to. And again, we're just kind of touching on some of the other certification programs. Most of these certification programs also have certification for multifamily buildings. And there was a study recently out in California that showed that buildings that have a third-party certification attached to them sell for, on average, 9% above the same property that doesn't have that certification. So it certainly has a little bit of a financial backing behind it. And I touched earlier on energy efficient mortgages. Those basically, if you're not familiar with them, they'll give you more favorable terms for your loan if you show an energy efficient building. Same with the tax incentives. They want to know that you're walking the walk when you come in and you say that, yep, that my building's energy efficient. So a lot of those require, again, the third party verification. Utility incentives, a lot of those have a, as you can see on your screen there, a test in and test out. And that's kind of like when you were in college or even high school, you could take an aptitude test, which would start you off on your studies. That was your test in, and then at the end you test it out to prove that you knew what you had learned. And it's the same with a building. We test in, we test the building before the upgrades are made, and then we test the building out at the end of the upgrades to prove that all the improvements are performing as they were said they were going to.
And the banks now are taking into effect appraisals, and Appraisal Institute now has an addendum that takes into effect energy upgrades when they're appraising a property. And one of those parts of that checklist on that addendum refers to the HERS rating. So with a better HERS rating, there's a chance to have a higher valuation of your property, which ties into that.
So the grant funding we just touched on, future energy code compliance is going to, we're seeing that require the HERS index. Right now there's what's called the prescriptive code and the performance code path. The prescriptive code is as I say in here, fading fast. The prescriptive code is basically you come up with a list of things that the building is going to have in it. R values in the walls, U values for the windows, particular doors, ceiling insulation, foundation insulation. Then the governing body says, okay, fine, you meet code. But what they've learned is that the performance of the building, even after that, if it's not built correctly, the performance of the building suffers. So they're starting to go towards performance-based code compliance, which drops back to the testing and third-party verification for the for your building's construction. And as Dave just said, we're starting to see it a lot in appraisals and MLS listings. There's actually a lot of the MLS listings now have spots for HERS indexes on them.
And on the performance-based code compliance, there are also ways where it could be certain aspects of the design of that structure which makes the prescriptive portion of the code difficult to detail in. So with the performance code path, it gives you a way to model it, show the performance path that it meets the code or it meets the requirement of any certification you're looking for on a performance path. It's a nice additional tool to have.
So who all is involved in rating a building? I mean, we've talked about the index so far. A RESNet HERS rater, I rate buildings. That's what I do full time. I'm out in the field with helpers. We'll show up if it's an existing building. We measure up the building, get construction details, wall insulation levels, window details, window and door details, attic insulation. We'll test the building. We'll do a blower door test, duct leakage testing, and see how it performs. And then we take all that information that we gather out in the field and we enter it into building modeling software. And that will give us a generic energy use. We'll also take, dropping back, we'll also take your energy bills. We can input up to 12 months of energy use of the building into the modeling software, and it will normalize the energy use based on what your energy bills are for an existing building. From there, the rating goes to a RESNet provider, and they are basically a quality assurance company, and every HERS rater is required to work with a RESNet provider. They basically check my math. They'll bring up any questions that they see in the modeling. They look at the prints and make sure that everything that I put in makes sense. And then from there, then it goes to RESNet. RESNet will check about 25% of the provider's jobs, and RESNet itself is, again, a quality assurance for the provider, and they are basically checking the provider's math just to make sure that they didn't miss anything. Here's an example of two modeling screens for the software. These are for above grade walls. On the right, you'll see that it's a quick fill build, and basically what that means is that anything that I have or that the HERS rater has in their library of walls, they can go down and do a quick pick and change the R value, the cavity thickness, insulation grades, which is the quality installation of the insulation. And then on the left, we can get pretty detailed in how involved your wall assembly is. So I can build it from the outside to the inside based, or I guess it would technically be the inside to the outside, based on what your assembly is and all the various materials used for the program to use that for modeling. And then we drill down pretty deep into the mechanicals. We can put in anything from your standard 80 AFUE atmospherically drafted furnace all the way up to a geothermal heating unit. We can do standard water heaters, high efficient tankless air conditioners, and we can, as new units come out, we can put those into our library to make use of them. We can give you kind of what if scenarios if you decide to upgrade from say a 90% AFUE to a 90, 94, 98% AFUE. What's the cost going to be for the energy, and what's the benefit? What's the cost for the mechanical equipment?
And the details which this gets into, like for instance, on the geothermal side of things, it takes into effect the depth of the loop fields, takes into effect the gallons per minute running through that loop field. So it takes many different factors into these equations, and these we just, because of time constraints, we just have a few examples in some of the slides, but these details get throughout every aspect of the building, from the envelope to equipment to everything else involved that uses energy on the project.
So then here's some of the equipment that you might see when a raider shows up at your property. In the upper left-hand corner, there's two examples of blower doors. You can daisy chain blower doors together to depending on the size of the building and whether or not it's common entrance, or you can use a single blower door if it's private entrance. And then lower left, we have a thermal imaging camera. To the right of that is a duct leakage tester to see how well the ducts are sealed for the conditioned air delivery in the unit. We've tested out duct systems where they have in excess of 25% of the blower capacity of the air handler leaking in the duct system. So the air is not getting delivered to where it needs to be, and that causes some comfort issues. Computer, borescope, combustion analyzer for the equipment. A lot of the equipment is, if it's an 80% AFUE furnace, that's 80% when it's brand new. As it gets older, its efficiency goes down, so we can actually measure the efficiency of the furnace and see where it's at. And then we got an anemometer for doing air volume, CFM volume, and ventilation equipment. Spot check temperatures with a thermostat. And then there's a lot of other equipment that we can get into if we need to. It depends on the goal of your project. Are you just looking for energy upgrades, or do you have specific problems that you're looking for?
Yeah, not all these tools will be used in every energy audit. As Kevin said, it really depends on what form of certification you're looking for, what type of problems you're trying to solve.
So what's the difference between a HERS rating for a new building versus an existing building? So for new construction, we're going to take your plans and we're going to put them into the software and begin our modeling there. We'll get a preliminary HERS index based off of what your construction details are and what your goals are based on the prints and conversations. And then we're going to come out and verify a few times during construction that everything is being constructed the way that it was shown on the prints and what the construction documents detail. And we can change things as we go through if insulation gets upgraded, we can change that, or if there's a decision to be made about insulation. We can do kind of what-if scenarios, before you get to that level. And then we perform third-party tests on building at the conclusion of construction just to prove that everything was put in and works the way that it's supposed to. We can do tests during construction also. We can test the duct system before the mechanicals when they're in rough-in stage, just to see how well they got sealed up. So we adjust the computer model as needed. And then send it off to our provider, and the building is issued a HERS index. For the existing buildings, it's a little more labor intensive, but basically we gather all the construction details of the building, and the rater will need the assistance of the building owner there to gather up utility bills, get into attic spaces, figure out what construction details are, what insulation levels are there, what are the windows, doors, is there any slab insulation. We perform the performance tests on the building, duct leakage, blower door, thermal imaging to get an idea of how was the building built originally, was the insulation put in correctly. And then we enter all that information into the computer model, and based on that we send that off to our provider, and they're issued a HERS index.
And a very important aspect of the new construction is the pre-drywall inspection, which does gradings based upon how the insulation and air sealing was applied. And you'll see, based upon the type of materials you choose, there's all different types of potential issues that can be caught through this inspection. And it's very valuable having this to be able to have a third-party verification before the drywall is put up, because at that point it's too late to go back and make any of these changes. So having that inspector, not just a code enforcement inspector, but someone else that's looking at strictly the energy and performance of it, and do an inspection before that drywall and before it becomes too late or a very costly repair.
So we got a question, is the pre-drywall inspection pre-attic insulation or post-attic insulation? And that is going to be pre-attic insulation.
Well, that'll depend on your strategy.
Oh, that's true.
Typically it's your blown-in attic insulation we inspected after the drywall, because of course it's using it as its as its support. But if you're doing a encapsulated attic system, that could be tested pre-drywall. And another strategy now too is pre-drywall if you're doing a type of spray foam or other insulations where that's included as your air sealing. Pre-doing an air seal test or blower door test before the drywall is done to make sure that there's no additional issues. Because when you're looking at a encapsulated attic system, that's basically you blow spray foam to the roofing deck to try to better to make your as efficient as possible. And if you have a small leak in there, it gets exacerbated through that type of system. Potential humidity and water issues can happen from there. So catching those early pre-drywall really helps. So the answer to your question is it depends.
So the advantage of having a new building rated before construction, like I was saying earlier, you can do what-if details on a lot of stuff. You can do, instead of doing a standard 16-inch on-center studs with blown cellulose, what if we switched to 24-inch on center with cellulose? Then what if we put an R5 or an R10 rigid foam wrap on the outside before we sided the building? What does that do to our energy load? And we can go to the contractor and say, what's it going to cost you? You can do a return on investment. Like Dave was saying, getting a rater involved before construction and during construction, you get those inspections going on for the pre-drywall and your mechanical details, making sure that the duct system is tested out so that it's delivering air where it's supposed to. It gives you you can pick on your mechanical details. What if I go to a 95 versus an 80 or a 98%? What if I put air source heat pumps for all my AC units, to where they're supplying the heat for 70% of the time? Appliance, what if I go with Energy Star versus standard? We can look at a lot of different things. The rater can also get a general required mechanical equipment sizing for the units. So you can see how many BTUs is needed in each unit, as opposed to relying on the mechanical contractor possibly using the rule of thumb for their sizing. or even comparing something to his manual J if he does it, so that you can, you got something to compare. They're not going to compare equal, but they should be pretty close. And then it'll also give you individual unit ventilation requirements per the ASHRAE ventilation standard 62.2 to make sure that the fresh air that's being brought into the units is adequate for the occupancy. And then ASHRAE 62.2 is simply a minimum ventilation standard for single and multi-families. It takes into account the occupancy and the square footage of the building, and then there's a certain allowance for unit leakage. A fraction of the leakage can be taken into account with that, but then it needs to be adjusted accordingly. If you got a unit that has people that do lots of cooking, have fish tanks, lots of plants, or just have a higher occupancy, say they're putting 2 people in each bedroom instead of just the one that the standard uses, you might need to ramp up your ventilation rate a little bit for that unit, and not every unit's going to require that. So it's simply a minimum rate, and make sure that they're getting the fresh air that they need.
And you'll see these standards become more part of building code going into the future, because as we tighten these homes and make them more airtight, the ventilation strategy becomes more and more important. So it's very important that that it's, one, designed right to begin with, and then 2, verify that it's performing to how it's been designed. Because without it performing, to have everything in place, not have it perform correctly, you'll have just as much problems if you never put it in the first place. So it's very important that it's not only tested after installation, but also similar to what you do in commercial buildings in commissioning it, have it retested at various stages as equipment begins to age, as filters need to be replaced, as things change throughout the building, as people adjust things, and they're gone back and looked at.
So these are a couple of examples of mechanical ventilation options. On the left is a heat recovery ventilator, and this is a unit that'll take the heat in the building and exchange about 70% of it, depending on the unit. It varies, but generally speaking, right around 70% of it with the heat in or the coolness. It works in 2 different directions, but with the outside air, the fresh air coming in gets either some of the heat or some of the cool. If you're in a heating zone, it'll get the heat from the interior air. The stale air will be exchanged over to the fresh incoming air. On the right is an energy recovery ventilator, and this recovers not only the heat but also the latent energy and the humidity in the stale air, and exchanges it over to the fresh incoming air. And these are just two strategies. There's a lot of different ones that can be explored. And this is just one manufacturer's recommendation on where to use an HRV or an ERV. ERVs are mostly recommended by this particular manufacturer down in the hot heatings, the humid heating zone, or the humid hot zone. There we go. Whereas an HRV is recommended pretty much everywhere else. So what's the advantage of having an existing building rated? It can turn up a lot of problems that you can't see. Air leaks, duct leakage, moisture issues. It'll turn up, if you have someone that's talented with a thermal imaging camera, it can turn up a washer leak on the 3rd floor before it becomes a problem. Well, it already is a problem, but before it causes major problems. You can't control what you don't measure. So if you don't know that your building is leaking 20 air changes per hour, you don't know, you can't control that because you don't know it exists. So that's one of the reasons for having an existing building rated. we got a question about what is the incremental cost of using an HRV and then an ERV if the baseline is exhaust-only ventilation. So exhaust-only relies on the makeup air being from unit leakage. And while this is accepted right now currently in the ASHRAE standards, we're seeing this is going to start going away. An HRV or an ERV, it's going to depend on the size of the unit. Is it a whole building unit? Is it not? You know, does each individual unit have their own unit, or is there a whole building that or multiple units in the building? But we're starting to see where the requirement is coming down that each unit has to have mechanical balanced makeup air so that they don't depressurize or pressurize the unit.
And what's important too is, you know, as we stated through some of the certifications to meet it doesn't necessarily become a requirement, but since the ventilation requirements are there, capturing that heat or pre-cooled air and transferring it to incoming air becomes, you know, a return on investment opportunity. And that's where that can help be calculated with a HERS rating, where to see not only your upfront cost of an HRV or ERV, but what's your yearly return on investment by just venting conditioned air out and replacing it with unconditioned air.
Here's some more advantages of having an existing building rated. You can prioritize your improvements. If you don't really know, if you're guessing, again, if your building hasn't been rated and the issues haven't been measured, what is your best attack? What should you attack first? Should it be your weatherization, or should it be, you know, your mechanicals? Maybe you did an excellent insulation package and air sealing package 5 years ago, and now we're at replacing windows or putting storms in. A modeler can come up with these. When you test out, one of the reports that can be given is it shows you how much money, or an estimate of how much money is being spent for air leakage on your mechanicals, on your lighting, on your water, so we can kind of prioritize what your upgrade should be, and give you a general ROI on that. Now, the ROI is kind of so the ROI is kind of a moving target based on energy costs, and those will fluctuate, and then also it drops back to that occupant behavior. But it'll give you a good idea of where things are at. We got a question, does HERS analyze all water costs or just hot water costs? It depends on the building and on the rater, but they can analyze your water usage. The HERS index does take in hot water costs. It's not too hard for the HERS rater to analyze your water usage through measurements at your faucets and seeing what your flush rate is on your toilets and shower heads and whatnot. So they can give you in their report, if you request it, they can give you a analyst on analyze your water usage and not just your hot water costs.
And then there is other certifications which kind of take that to a step further, like for instance the EPA WaterSense program, that kind of goes above and beyond, you know, just the hot water needs and looks at, you know, the whole water usage at the entire building. So that can be used in conjunction with the HERS rating, basically through the same raters that would already be there.
So what are the advantages of having an existing building rated? You can, you know, it depends on what the goals of having the building rated are. You know, if you're looking to get a energy efficient mortgage, if you're refinancing a property or buying it new, the energy efficient mortgage will give you a more favorable terms on your mortgage for an energy efficient building. Maybe you're trying to include money in that mortgage for energy upgrades, and so they want to know that the money that they loaned you was actually used for what you said it was going to be used for. If you decided that you wanted to do a performance path for new construction, it demonstrates that you met that you said that, you know, the way that the building was going to be built, with the trade-offs that we did, it met that code compliance. Did your mechanical contractor do what was in his proposal, where he got his HVAC system is balanced, his duct leakage is down where he needs it, the air is being distributed where it needs to be distributed to, and each unit is nice and comfortable. And then you can show, if you've already done your upgrades, you can show a potential investor or purchaser, that, look, my building is more energy efficient. It's worth taking another look at. Again, if there's another building around the corner that's not as efficient as yours, they might want to look a little longer and harder at your building versus the building around the corner. Or a government agency might be more apt to get, or even a nonprofit might be more apt to get involved with your building. If you can show them that it doesn't cost as much to operate. Maximum size of okay, so we got a question, what is the maximum size of a building where a HERS score can be applied? Square feet, number of floors. Generally, it's a 3-story multifamily. And then it gets into, it steps away from central heating and cooling units and individual units. What is the cost of a HERS score for a 2,500 square foot new home and for an existing rehab? That's going to depend on the raters in your area. It's very regional.
Yeah, it can depend on the what exactly you're looking for. If you're just looking for a basic HERS score, or how in depth you're looking to have your HERS rater do. But there's typically in every area there's many different HERS raters we can have competitive bids against, and also one of the things too is experience of the HERS rater can affect that. The more experienced the HERS rater is, the better results you're going to get, and potentially changes in the cost of that as well. So it's good to, when you're getting competitive quotes, look at the experience of the HERS raters as well.
Yeah, and then we got one more. Can you provide guidance on a testing protocol for an existing common corridor 3-story multifamily property with a central system? Yeah, we can contact the host here after the webinar. We'll be put in contact with you, and we can discuss that probably over email or over the phone. So what information is collected and why? So the rater and their crew are going to come out and they're going to collect all the construction details. What is the foundation detail? Do you have 4 inches of foam underneath it? Do you have, is the perimeter of your slab, is that insulated? What are your windows and door details? How old is your equipment? How old are your appliances? And again, we're going to grab the historic utility use, if it's available, for the existing building. And then we're going to enter all that into the software. And the software is going to crunch its numbers and come up with a fairly accurate energy use. And then those improvements can be modeled. And again, estimate the savings and calculate a approximate ROI. Yeah. All right, go ahead. And then through RESNet, there's a process called sampling, which is for subdivisions and multifamily units. Sampling is simply the ability to reduce the per unit cost of rating a building for new construction in either subdivisions or multifamily. It can potentially lower the price point, and I say potentially because there's a protocol that you have to follow, and it's when you're testing the units. If a unit fails, there's a certain number of units that have to pass 100%. Then once you get outside that, if a unit fails, then you start dropping back. So it can lower it, but you got to get your general contractor, your builders, your subcontractors all involved and on board to see so that they know what's going on and they do their best to give you the best building that they possibly can. And the sampling isn't just random units. It takes the worst case units in the development and rates those. And once a rating is issued, all the units in that development get that worst case rating. So they might actually, if you rated that unit individually, it might have a lower HERS score, but because it went down the sampling path, it's issued the worst case rating.
Yeah, and there's a question, is sampling relevant to assessing cost-effective improvements in an existing multifamily building? And that's where we really see it the most, rather than having to spend the cost of testing each individual apartment or condo within an area. You can do the sampling protocol and reduce your overall HERS rating costs, and be able to apply a common score across all the units rather than having individual scores from all the different units.
So then what information can be included in the rating report? It's, as I said, if it's an existing building pre-construction or pre-renovation, it can show your air infiltration costs, your insulation, your energy loss through the walls, mechanical upgrade costs. It can, for new construction, it can show code compliance. We touched on a lot of these earlier: energy efficient mortgages, the EEMs, tax incentives, the whole shoot match. Third party, and the other thing that's nice is for the building owners, it doesn't. The HERS rating and HERS index is a third party verification, so it shows to the owner that things were done exactly the way that the owner wanted them to be done. They're not relying on the code officials who really can't say that it was done correctly or it wasn't done correctly. The only thing that the code officials can say is that yes, it meets code. It's third party verification for the building owner. We touched on how can your tenants benefit earlier. Building with a low HERS index, lower energy costs per unit. So they have more of their discretionary income or percentage of their income, that they have to spend on food or other bills that they have. If the utilities are paid by the building owner, it's more money in their pocket. And for the states and federal government, if they have a heating assistance program, or if they're putting money into that, their money goes farther. Each unit has a greater comfort level. The air is being distributed where it needs to be distributed. They're getting fresh air. They're getting cooling. They're not losing all the air in the stud cavities. The higher indoor air quality that's shown in these buildings can lead to lower healthcare costs, which healthier tenants are happy tenants. So
there's a lot of studies to show that the more sustainable green features that are put into a building that improve comfort level of the occupants, longer the occupant will enjoy and stay in that building. So you'll have lower occupant turnover by improving the thermal comfort of those occupants.
And then how do the various government agencies benefit? Again, if they're funding the buildings, they can reduce the mechanical costs by having a third party say, well, you shouldn't have a 100,000 BTU furnace per unit. You only need a 60,000 BTU furnace, so lower costs there. Lower energy costs if the state or the agencies are paying for the energy units. Each dollar goes farther. I mean, it's dollars and cents, and a lot of people say, well, we can't afford to do this. We can't afford to make these buildings more energy efficient. But my argument there is, you're building these things. These buildings are being built for use for 100 years. So it's not just about what is the construction cost. But if gas right now in Michigan, we have just under $10 per 1,000 cubic feet natural gas. If that goes up to $30, there's going to be a lot of places that won't be able to afford to heat their buildings, or they're going to have significant financial outlays. Lower maintenance and upkeep costs. It can turn up moisture infiltration issues. The blower door and the thermal imaging camera are a great combination because it shows a lot of problems. It can show lack of insulation in spots, insulation that's slumped. And then water infiltration too, through roof or wall leakage or window leakage or anything. So it can show a lot of different things. When should you contact a RESNet HERS rater? It's really before you do anything that has to do with a building. Multifamily, single family, any building. Before it's designed, before you purchase one. Again, if you go in and purchase a building, if you don't investigate what the utility costs are, you're doing yourself a great disservice. And with new building design, you can run through the what-if scenarios, and that's a lot cheaper to do those then than it is to do a retrofit on a building. Same with the improvements made to existing buildings. If you got a lot of complaints for tenants because their units aren't comfortable, or one's too hot, one's too cold, a lot of times a HERS rater can help you solve those problems. Maybe not by himself, but we got a pretty good network of professionals that we run around with. If you think your energy bills could be lower, that's a huge one. Or if you think that your tenant bill should be lower, if your tenants are paying their heating bills or utility bills. If they can, if you think they should be lower or just want to look at it, it's a relatively small investment. If you're thinking about adding renewable energy, grab the low-hanging fruit first. Upgrade your insulation, upgrade your attic insulation, your wall insulation, do your air sealing. Get your BTU and your kWh loads down just as low as you can before you put that renewable energy on. If you can get it down from 15 kW, a 15 kW solar array down to a 7, you just saved yourself half of the solar array, and it's doing the same thing. So basically, it's if you're thinking about doing anything with any building, you should be in contact with a HERS rater. Yeah. All right. And we got a few questions here that we're going to touch on. So what kind of ground truth studies have been done to compare predicted performance to actual? There are, through Energy Star, Lead for Homes, and many other certification, third-party certification, they have many studies out that have shown the reduced energy usage, and again, the test in and test out that I spoke about at the beginning, that is going to put the proof in the pudding, as my mom used to say, where the building performs. The blower door comes in at a 25 ACH pre-renovation, and post-renovation it's down at 5. Right there, you've reduced it by 20 ACH. Your mechanicals, if you're upgrading your mechanicals, we can again look at the size of your mechanicals. Are they sized appropriately? We can work with your heating and cooling contractor to make sure that they're sized correctly. The duct system, is the HVAC system balanced? Is it getting the air where it needs to be? And that's going to, if one room is cold, they might ramp up the thermostat 10 degrees to get that one room warmer, but now the rest of the unit is 10 degrees too warm. So balancing out your heating and cooling system helps out with the comfort issue and ultimately lowers the lowers the energy use in utility bills.
This is Jim Newman. If I could just add something to that, there are many studies that show that these ratings do test out well. There are almost as many studies that show that they don't. And why is that? It's many times because of the way the particular building is operated. If you have a wonderful, highly efficient HVAC system, but instead of turning a thermostat up or down, the tenant opens the windows, for instance, in the middle of the winter because they're too warm, rather than turning the thermostat down a couple of degrees, that throws all this energy information that you've gotten from your HERS rater right out the window, same window that the tenant opens. So a lot of it is education of the tenants. And if the tenants aren't paying the utility bills, they really don't care. If they're paying them, many times they don't understand. Hey, your bills could be lower if you just lower your thermostat instead of opening the windows in the middle of the winter. Those are the kinds of things that throw some of these ratings off, and that was an excellent question.
Yeah, and what else can happen too is once you have an estimated HERS rating and a predicted energy use for a building, once you build it, if it's not meeting what you predicted, it gives you an opportunity to go back and find out why didn't it and what can we do. Was there something done wrong? Was there something that wasn't installed correctly? It gives you the ability to weigh against that. Otherwise, you would never had any clue that it's operating differently than you predicted.
We got a question, doesn't unit sampling mostly test leakage between units rather than overall building efficiency? Unit sampling with a blower door, if it is a common entrance, well, there's ways to test each unit individually. Basically, with multiple blower doors, you isolate that unit, and you can figure out right down to not only how much it's leaking, but you can figure out, is it going through the ceiling, is it going through which wall is it going through, or is it going through the floor? But the sampling allows for a multi-unit to get a HERS rating on the entire building rather than just each individual unit. So we wouldn't have to test and model each unit. We model the worst case scenario units rather than every unit. And then we test out those units. And then the sampling, the HERS index, is applied to all the units. What is the difference between a HERS score for units within a multifamily building and a HERS score for whole multifamily building? Is there a difference? No, there's not. HERS score is a HERS score. It's code built versus what the existing building is. Can a rater and provider be from the same company? No, they cannot. The provider is very rarely on site. They might come up and do a quality audit on a piece of property, but that's about 1% of the time. For instance, my provider is out of New York, and they come in every now and again to do a quality assurance in rating with me, just to make sure that I'm following what I need to follow. So, no, a rater and a provider can't be. For a single-family home, what is an acceptable HERS rating for a new construction home? What about a gut rehab? Currently, I'm involved in 3 projects. 1 is new construction, and 2 are gut rehabs, and they're all going for a net zero energy, which is going to give them a 0 on the HERS rating. So, single-family home, it depends on the year of construction. There's a lot of variables in there, and if it was built in the 70s and it came in with a HERS score of 75 current in modern day, it'd be a great house. If it was built in currently and it came in with a HERS, if it was built last month and it came in with a HERS score of 145, it's not so well constructed. So it's all, you know, HERS is the lower the better, regardless of whether or not it's new construction or a gut rehab. Lower is better. And if it's a gut rehab, I would say you know, that's where you want to do your test in and test out. Do a preliminary rating on a gut rehab, and then see where it tests out at, so you can see what your improvement is percentage wise. So.
And then different certifications require different HERS ratings to achieve those certifications, such as, you know, Energy Star requires an 85 score on their HERS rating versus 2009 building code. There'll be different HERS scores related to, for instance, the new tax incentive for new homes. If the builder can show a 50% reduction in energy costs versus 2006 energy codes, you know, there's a $2,000 rebate to that builder, federal rebate available. So different standards and different certifications and different rebates may require or do require different HERS scores. And those HERS scores could be associated with different building codes, 2006, 2009, depending on what they're using as their standards. I think that's all the questions.
Yeah.
That's all the questions, and just a reminder, this webinar will be sent out to everybody after we're done. If you have any follow-up questions after that, you can contact our office, Fusco, Shaffer, and Pappas. My name is Pat Berry, and the email address is pbarry@fsparch.com, and I can also forward any of those questions to our panelists. It looks like we have one more question here before we end.
It says, you mentioned HERS scores being included in MLS. Are you aware of a market? Yes. Traverse City, Michigan. Down in Florida, there's a couple of markets. It's really the local real estate associations, real estate agent associations, there we go, that drove that, and they are beginning to implement that kind of on a region-by-region basis. The other thing that we're starting to see is that they're going to, for the mortgage financing, they're starting to, there's a lot of talk going around about it not only being principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, but adding energy into that.
Now, what that was up on a bill, on a federal bill, got kind of stalled out, but it's been proposed actually a couple times.
So I would imagine in the next probably 4 or 5 years, maybe sooner, maybe a little longer after that, you'll start seeing energy being a regular calculation in the mortgage monthly payment calculation. Thank you very much, everybody. And any questions, as Pat said, please forward them on.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.